A wealthy tourist stood face to face with a royal guard at Buckingham Palace. The crowd watched with their phones raised high. Then, in one disgusting moment, the man spat directly on the guard's face. The saliva ran down his cheek like a tear. But the guard didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. What happened next wasn't what anyone expected. This decorated war veteran was about to deliver a response so powerful, it would be viewed by millions around the world. A response that taught everyone watching what true strength really means. This is the story of Guard Thomas Blackwood, and the day one foolish man learned the hardest lesson of his life. The summer sun beat down hard on Buckingham Palace. It was a Thursday afternoon in August. Hundreds of tourists crowded around the palace gates. Their phones were out. Their cameras were flashing. Everyone wanted that perfect photo with the famous royal guards. Standing perfectly still among all the chaos was Guard Thomas Blackwood. He was 29 years old. His red uniform was spotless despite the brutal heat. His bearskin hat sat perfectly on his head. To the tourists, he looked like a statue, a photo opportunity, a piece of living history frozen in time. But Thomas Blackwood was so much more than that. He had served 8 years in the British military. 2 of those years were spent in Afghanistan. He had earned medals for his bravery. He had saved lives under enemy fire. He had carried wounded brothers on his back through gunfire. The scars on his left shoulder told stories most people would never know. Every morning, Blackwood woke up before dawn. He spent 3 full hours preparing his uniform. Every button was polished until it shined like a mirror. Every strap was perfectly aligned. Every crease was razor sharp. To some people, this seemed excessive. Why spend so much time on a ceremonial uniform? But Blackwood knew better. This uniform carried centuries of British tradition. It represented honor, sacrifice, duty. When he put it on, he became part of something bigger than himself. He became a living symbol of everything the crown stood for. On an average day, Blackwood would face hundreds of tourists. Most were respectful. Some were funny. A few would try to make him laugh or break his composure. It was a game tourists loved to play, and most guards had learned to handle it with patience. But this Thursday afternoon would be different. Very different. Before we continue with the story, you need to understand something important. The Royal Guards are not just ceremonial soldiers. They're not actors in costumes. They're not tourist attractions. They are elite, highly trained combat soldiers. The Royal Guards belong to 5 prestigious regiments: the Grenadier Guards, the Coldstream Guards, the Scots Guards, the Irish Guards, and the Welsh Guards. These regiments have existed since the 1660s, over 350 years of military excellence. Every guard standing at Buckingham Palace has completed intense military training. They know martial arts, hand-to-hand combat, weapon proficiency. Many have served in active war zones before earning the right to wear that red uniform. They stand at attention for 2 hours straight without moving, in freezing winter cold, in summer heat that reaches 90 degrees, in pouring rain, in howling wind. Their discipline is absolute. The uniforms they wear are not just for show. The bearskin hats stand 18 inches tall. They're made from real Canadian black bear fur. Each one weighs about 1.5 pounds. The red tunic represents centuries of British military history. Every detail has meaning. Every thread carries tradition. And here's what most tourists don't know. The guards have rules they can follow if someone crosses the line. They can shout warnings. They can stomp their feet with tremendous force. They can point their rifles at threats. And yes, they are authorized to use physical force if necessary. These are not weak men playing dress-up. These are warriors protecting their queen and their country. They've earned their position through blood, sweat, and unwavering dedication. Thomas Blackwood was one of these elite soldiers, and he took his duty seriously. At 2:30 in the afternoon, a group of American tourists approached Blackwood's post. They were loud, laughing, clearly drunk. Leading the group was a man named Kevin Reynolds. Though Blackwood didn't know his name yet, everything about Reynolds screamed entitlement. His expensive polo shirt, his designer sunglasses, his practiced smirk, the Rolex on his wrist that cost more than most people's cars. Kevin Reynolds came from old Texas oil money. His family was worth millions. Back home in Dallas, he was used to getting his way. Waiters rushed to serve him. Business executives listened to his every word. His American Express black card opened every door. He had flown to London first class. He stayed at 5-star hotels. He ate at exclusive restaurants where regular people couldn't even get reservations. Everything in his life reinforced one simple message. He was better than everyone else. He was important. He was special. But standing in front of Guard Blackwood, his money meant nothing. His status meant nothing. And this drove Reynolds crazy. The morning had started well enough for him. Champagne breakfast at the Ritz. Shopping at Harrods where staff treated him like royalty. But as the day went on and the drinking continued, something shifted inside him. That familiar restlessness began to stir. That need to prove himself, that desperate hunger for attention. His 3 friends were with him, all of them recording on their phones. All of them encouraging his worst instincts. They had spent hours pub crawling through London's finest establishments. Now, drunk and looking for entertainment, they spotted their target. The Royal Guard standing perfectly still. An easy victim, they thought. Someone to humiliate for viral internet fame. Reynolds pulled out his phone. "Hey, look at this guy," he called to his friends. "Bet you $50 I can make him crack." His friends laughed and raised their cameras higher. A crowd began to form around them. Other tourists stopped to watch. Some smiled, expecting harmless fun. Others frowned, sensing something ugly was about to happen. Reynolds was ready to put on a show, and Guard Blackwood was about to face the biggest test of his career. The first attempts were predictable. Reynolds posed next to Blackwood for selfies. He made exaggerated faces, threw peace signs, stuck out his tongue. "Come on, buddy, smile for the camera." The crowd around them grew larger. 20 people, then 30, then 50. Everyone had their phones out. Street vendors nearby slowly pushed their carts away. They had seen situations like this before. They knew how quickly things could turn bad. Blackwood remained absolutely motionless. His eyes stared straight ahead. In his mind, he recited the oath he had taken years ago. The words gave him strength. He had faced worse than this, much worse. Taliban fighters shooting at him, explosions all around, brothers dying in his arms. This was nothing. Just another drunk tourist who forgot his manners. But Reynolds was just getting started. Frustrated by the lack of reaction, he stepped closer. The expensive scotch on his breath mixed with designer cologne. He invaded Blackwood's personal space. "What's with the funny hat, man? Did you lose a bet?" He reached up as if to touch the bearskin cap. His hand hovered inches away. Even drunk, some small part of him remembered warnings about not touching the guards. A middle-aged British woman in the crowd spoke up. Her voice was sharp with anger. "Young man, show some respect." She clutched her handbag tighter. Her knuckles were white, but her words only fueled Reynolds more. He turned to face the crowd. He bowed dramatically like a performer on stage. "Respect? For what? Standing there like a mannequin?" He laughed. "My tax dollars probably pay for this whole circus." The statement was historically inaccurate, but his tone was deliberately provocative, bitter, mean. A few American tourists in the crowd exchanged embarrassed glances. They wanted to distance themselves from this man. He was making them all look bad. Through it all, Blackwood remained still, but his mind was very active. He noticed everything. The way Reynolds' friends had spread out to film from different angles. The uncomfortable shuffling of other tourists. The palace security officer in the distance now talking urgently into his radio. 8 years of military service had taught Blackwood to observe, to assess, to prepare. He noticed Reynolds's slight sway, the forced nature of his laugh, the way his right hand kept clenching and unclenching. These were signs. Signs of someone working themselves up to do something stupid. "Maybe he's broken," Reynolds announced, moving to stand directly in front of Blackwood. "Hey, robot, anyone home?" He waved his hand in front of Blackwood's face, close enough that the guard could smell the Macallan 25 on his breath. Expensive scotch. Not that it made the disrespect any easier to bear. The crowd had grown even larger now. Some people lowered their phones. They looked uncomfortable. A young couple hurried their children away. shooting disapproving looks over their shoulders. But Reynolds' friends were ecstatic. "This is going viral for sure," one shouted, adjusting his camera angle. His Rolex caught the sunlight. "Do the thing we talked about, Kev. Do it." Their excitement had a desperate edge, like people trying too hard to convince themselves they were having fun. A young girl, no more than 7 or 8, tugged at her mother's sleeve. Her ice cream cone was melting, forgotten in her hand. "Mommy, why is that man being so mean?" The question hung in the air. Innocent. Clear. Several people shifted uncomfortably. A father pulled his son closer and whispered something, probably a lesson about respect. But Reynolds didn't hear, or maybe he chose not to hear. He was too far gone in his performance, too desperate to prove something. He turned to his audience again, arms spread wide, swaying slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time we found out if these guards are actually human." His voice had a theatrical quality, but underneath was something ugly, a desperate need to assert dominance, to prove he was important, to fill the void that his wealth couldn't touch. Blackwood felt his jaw tighten, almost imperceptibly. In Afghanistan, he had learned to read people, to sense when a situation was about to cross a line. That same instinct was screaming at him now. He could feel the weight of his ceremonial rifle, the press of his bearskin cap, the eyes of centuries of tradition watching through him. But his training held firm. He remained motionless, eyes fixed on a point in the distance. In his peripheral vision, he saw other tourists backing away, creating a circle of space. They could sense it too. Something was about to happen. A moment of reckoning was coming. And they were right. Reynolds circled Blackwood like a predator. His expensive polo shirt was drenched with sweat. But in his alcohol-clouded mind, he failed to see the truth. He wasn't the hunter here. He never was. "You know what I think?" Reynolds announced to his audience. "I think these guys are just scared, scared to move, scared to speak, scared to be real." His words slurred at the edges. They hide behind tradition because they're too weak to face reality. Blackwood's mind flashed briefly to a morning in Helmand Province, under heavy enemy fire for 3 hours, protecting a wounded colleague, calling in air support while bullets tore through the air around him. Weak was not a word in his vocabulary. Reynolds leaned in even closer. His sunglasses hung loosely from his collar. What do they even do here anyway? Stand around like statues while the world laughs at them? An elderly gentleman stepped forward from the crowd. An RAF veteran pin glinted on his jacket. "Son, that's enough. You've had your fun." But Reynolds was beyond reason. The alcohol, the wounded pride, the audience. It created a perfect storm. "You want to know what I think of your precious tradition?" Time seemed to slow down. Later, dozens of videos would capture this moment from every angle. But none would fully capture the horrified silence that fell over the crowd. Reynolds gathered the saliva in his mouth, and he spat directly onto Blackwood's face. The spittle landed just below the guard's right eye. For a fraction of a second, even the birds stopped singing. The crowd's collective gasp created a vacuum of sound. It was as if all of London held its breath. Reynolds stood there with a triumphant smirk, clearly expecting something, a reaction, a breakdown, a victory. What he got instead was far more terrifying. Blackwood didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. The saliva ran slowly down his cheek, like a tear. But his expression remained as immovable as the palace walls behind him. His eyes stayed fixed straight ahead. His posture remained perfect. His breathing stayed controlled. In that moment, the contrast between the two men couldn't have been starker. Reynolds swaying, sweating, desperate. Blackwood solid as stone, dignity intact despite the ultimate insult. The silence was shattered by the sound of running feet. Palace security had been watching from a distance. Now they were moving fast through the crowd. But more importantly, there was another sound, the rhythmic march of boots. The guard captain and his patrol were approaching from behind. Reynolds suddenly became aware that his actions might have real consequences. He took a stumbling step backward. His confident smirk began to fade. His friends had lowered their phones. The reality of what they had just filmed was sinking in. One muttered under his breath, "Kev, man, what did you do? What did?" The crowd had formed a complete circle now. Nobody wanted to stand too close, but nobody left either. They could sense it. History was about to be made, though not in the way Reynolds had intended. For the first time since the incident began, Blackwood's eyes moved. Just his eyes, not his head, not his body, just his eyes. They locked onto Reynolds. The gaze carried the same intensity that had once tracked enemy movements across Afghan mountains. It wasn't anger, it wasn't hatred, it was something far more powerful. The weight of centuries of tradition, honor, and duty focused like a laser on one foolish soul. Reynolds actually took another step back. For the first time, fear flickered across his face. Guard Captain Harrison's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Guard! Stand down!" The command was delivered with quiet authority. It gave Blackwood permission to do something he hadn't done in 8 hours of duty. The motion was deliberate, precise, somehow more intimidating than any sudden action could have been. Blackwood pivoted exactly 45 degrees, came to attention, saluted his superior with textbook precision. "Sir, permission to address the situation." "Granted." What happened next would be described by witnesses in dozens of different ways. Some would call it a speech. Others would call it a lesson. Still others would describe it as one of the most powerful moments they'd ever witnessed. But all would agree on one thing. They had never seen dignity quite like this. Blackwood reached up with his white-gloved hand. Slowly, deliberately, he wiped the spittle from his cheek. His movements were unhurried, almost ceremonial. When he spoke, his voice carried across the courtyard. Clear, measured, powerful. 8 years ago I took an oath. He paused. Not just to the crown, but to everything these gates represent. Tradition, honor, sacrifice. His eyes found Reynolds. The tourist had lost all traces of his previous bravado. "While you were in that pub, working up the courage to come here and make a spectacle of yourself, I was standing guard over a history that stretches back centuries." The crowd was absolutely silent now. Phones were still recording, but they were forgotten in hands that hung limply at their sides. "You see this uniform?" Blackwood continued. "Before I earned the right to wear it, I served 2 tours in Afghanistan. I've watched brothers in arms fall, defending the values you mock. This isn't a costume, sir. It's a symbol of dedication that you clearly cannot comprehend." He turned slightly, addressing the broader crowd now. "Every day we stand here, not as statues, not as tourist attractions, but as living reminders of the discipline, honor, and sacrifice that built and preserved this nation. We endure the heat, the cold, the rain, and yes, even the occasional fool who mistakes our discipline for weakness." Reynolds opened his mouth to speak, but Captain Harrison's sharp glance silenced him immediately. 2 police officers had arrived. They stood ready, but even they seemed captivated by Blackwood's words. "You wanted to know if we're human?" Blackwood's voice took on a softer tone, though it lost none of its power. "We are. We feel every insult, every joke, every attempt to break our composure. But we stand firm, because that's what duty demands. Because some things in this world are bigger than personal comfort or ego. Some traditions deserve respect, even if you don't understand them." He turned back to face Reynolds directly. "You came here hoping to create a viral video, to get your moment of internet fame. Congratulations, sir. You've succeeded." He paused. "But not in the way you intended." The elderly RAF veteran in the crowd had tears streaming down his face. Parents were drawing their children closer, speaking in hushed tones, explaining the significance of what they were witnessing. "Instead of exposing weakness, you've demonstrated why we stand here day after day. Because there must always be those who stand firm against disrespect, who maintain dignity in the face of ignorance, who remind others that honor isn't just an old-fashioned word." Blackwood's voice grew stronger now, more forceful. "I don't expect an apology, but I do hope that someday you'll understand what happened here. This isn't about you or me. It's about everything we guard here, not just the buildings and the people within them, but the principles they represent. With that, Blackwood turned back to Captain Harrison, saluted once more, and resumed his position with the same precision that marked his every movement. The spittle on his cheek had dried in the afternoon sun. It left no visible mark, much like how Reynolds's attempt to leave a stain on the institution had only served to make it shine brighter. The police officers stepped forward. Their duty was clear now, but the real judgment had already been delivered, not through force, not through anger, but through a display of character that would be remembered long after the handcuffs clicked into place. As the police led Kevin Reynolds away, his designer sunglasses slipped from his collar. They clattered to the ground, forgotten, worthless. His friends shuffled away from the scene. Those same young men who had been so eager to film couldn't meet anyone's eyes now. Their phones were finally lowered. The shame on their faces was visible to everyone. "Assaulting a Queen's Guard," one officer explained to the crowd. "That's a serious offense. You'll have plenty of time to reflect on Guard Blackwood's words while we process your case." The videos spread across social media like wildfire. Within 1 hour, multiple angles had been uploaded. Each showed a different perspective, but they all told the same story. Not of a guard's composure breaking, but of dignity triumphing over disrespect. "Respect the Guard" began trending on Twitter within the hour. Comments flooded in from around the world. This is what real strength looks like, standing firm in the face of disrespect. That speech should be played in schools. Tradition, honor, duty, values we need more than ever. Watch how he maintains his dignity even after being spat on. That's character. Reynolds' identity didn't stay private for long. Internet detectives tracked him down within hours. His Texas oil family's PR team scrambled to contain the damage. But the court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. His LinkedIn profile was flooded with comments about respect and dignity. Several exclusive clubs in London quietly removed his name from their guest lists. The Dallas Country Club, where he had been a member for years, began reconsidering his membership. But perhaps the most powerful consequences weren't the legal charges or the public shame. They were the conversations happening around dinner tables, in classrooms, as parents and teachers used the incident to discuss respect, duty, and the importance of understanding traditions different from our own. A group of school children who witnessed the incident wrote letters to Buckingham Palace. One 9-year-old's words captured the sentiment perfectly. "Dear Guard Blackwood, today you taught us that being strong doesn't mean being mean. Sometimes the strongest thing is to be kind and respectful, even when others are not." Tourism officials reported an interesting shift in visitor behavior at Buckingham Palace. In the days following the incident, tourists still took photos, still smiled and waved. But there was a new undercurrent of respect. Parents could be heard explaining to their children not just what the guards did, but why they did it. The shallow jokes about making them laugh were replaced by genuine interest in the history and tradition they represented. Reynolds' case moved swiftly through the legal system. The judge's remarks during sentencing would later be quoted extensively. "In assaulting Guard Blackwood, you didn't just attack an individual. You attacked the principles of duty, honor, and respect that he represents. Your actions have served as a powerful reminder of why these values must be preserved and protected." The fine was substantial, £5,000. But the real punishment was the requirement to perform 200 hours of community service at veterans organizations. Reynolds would later admit that nothing in his privileged life had prepared him for the humbling experience of serving those who had served their country, of listening to their stories, of understanding what real sacrifice meant. As for Guard Blackwood, his viral moment found its way into training materials, for military units around the world, for police forces, for anyone who needed to understand how to maintain authority through character rather than force. It became a case study, not just in military discipline but in human dignity. The next day, Thomas Blackwood resumed his post. Same dedication, same precision, same unwavering commitment to duty. The only difference was the depth of respect in the eyes of those who passed by. They understood now exactly what it meant to stand guard, not just over a palace, but over principles. This story teaches us something profound about strength. Real strength isn't about breaking others down. It's not about using force or anger. It's not about proving you're tough by humiliating someone else. Real strength is standing firm in your values, even when others try to break you. Especially when others try to break you. Dignity isn't weakness. It never was. It's the ultimate form of power. Because anyone can react with violence, anyone can lash out, anyone can let their emotions control them. But it takes true strength to remain composed, to maintain your principles, to respond with measured words instead of fists. That's the kind of strength that changes hearts and minds. The Royal Guards continue their mission today, rain or shine, heat or cold. They stand watch. Not because they're statues, not because they're emotionless, but because they understand something most people never learn. Some things are bigger than individual comfort. Some traditions deserve respect. Some values are worth defending with every fiber of your being. Guard Thomas Blackwood proved that on a hot Thursday afternoon in August, and the world was better for witnessing it. So here's a question for you. When was the last time you witnessed true strength shown through restraint rather than reaction? Have you ever had to stand firm in your principles when someone tried to break you down? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear about dignity and honor today. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about tradition, respect, and what it truly means to be strong. Hit that bell icon so you never miss an upload. Remember this. Real strength isn't about breaking others, it's about standing unbroken. No matter what the world throws at you. That's the lesson Guard Blackwood taught us all, and it's a lesson worth remembering.